The room was a cathedral of cold glass and colder ambition. Alex Vance felt like a ghost haunting its altar, a poorly dressed phantom clutching a worn leather satchel. He stood before the long, polished mahogany table, a piece of wood so dark and reflective it seemed to drink the light from the room. Seated around it were the demigods of venture capital, the board of Thorn Ventures. They wore their tailored suits like armor and their indifference like a crown. At the head of the table sat Marcus Thorn himself, a man whose smile never quite reached his eyes, leaving them as hard and gray as the city skyline behind him. Alex cleared his throat, the sound small and dry in the cavernous space. He had not slept in what felt like a week, living on a diet of black coffee and raw hope. The numbers, the algorithms, the projections, they were all burned onto the back of his eyelids. "Gentlemen," he began, his voice steadier than he felt, "I'm here today to talk about saving lives." A few of them shifted, a subtle rustle of expensive fabric. One of them, a younger man with slicked back hair, openly checked his watch, a sliver of platinum and contempt. Alex pressed on, clicking a small remote. The screen behind him lit up with the name of his project, Aegis. Aegis is not just another data analytics platform. It's a predictive AI engine designed to anticipate civic emergencies before they happen. It analyzes traffic patterns, weather data, public infrastructure stress reports, social media sentiment, thousands of disparate data points in real time. It can predict a multi-car pileup on a foggy highway, a water main break in an aging part of the city, a flash flood overwhelming a storm drain. It can see the crisis coming and alert authorities to take preventative measures. He spoke for 20 minutes, his voice filled with a desperate, earnest passion. He laid out the architecture of the system, the machine learning models, the 5-year implementation plan, the conservative revenue projections based on municipal contracts. He poured every ounce of his soul into the presentation, the culmination of 3 years of relentless, solitary work. This was not just a company to him. It was a penance. It was the only thing that gave the gaping hole in his life any sense of shape or purpose. When he finished, silence descended. It was not a thoughtful silence. It was a heavy, dismissive void. Marcus Thorn leaned forward, steepling his fingers. His voice was smooth, polished, and utterly devoid of warmth. "Mr. Vance." That was quite the story. A noble one, but we are not in the business of funding stories. We are in the business of returns. The returns are there, Alex insisted, his hands gripping the edge of the lectern. The cost of a single major infrastructure failure can run into the tens of millions. The cost of a preventable 10-car pileup in terms of insurance, healthcare, and lost productivity is staggering. Aegis isn't a cost, it's an investment in efficiency and safety. It saves money as much as it saves lives. The slick-haired man, whose name was Jarrett, snorted. It was a quiet, ugly sound. It's grief-fueled fantasy. Marcus, he's built a digital ghost to try and stop the past from happening again. It's a touching tragedy, not a business model. The words hit Alex like a physical blow. He felt the blood drain from his face. He had intentionally left the personal motivation out of the pitch, knowing they would use it as a weapon. He had not realized they would forge the weapon themselves. Thorn gave a slight, condescending nod. "Jarrett is blunt. But his point stands. Your projections are based on municipalities adopting a system they don't understand to prevent disasters they can't imagine. It's a solution in search of a problem. We're looking for the next social media app, the next gig economy disruptor. Not civic-minded science fiction." The dismissal was absolute. The other board members began gathering their papers, their body language screaming their impatience. The meeting was over. Alex felt a cold wave of humiliation wash over him, so intense it was dizzying. He had spent months preparing for this, years building the code, and they had swatted it away like an irritating fly in less than half an hour. "Thank you for your time," he said, the words tasting like ash in his mouth. He packed his laptop into his satchel, his movements stiff and robotic. He did not look at them as he walked out. He could feel their eyes on his back, not with pity, but with the faint, bored amusement of kings watching a court jester who had failed to entertain. The elevator ride down felt like a descent into a forgotten abyss. The polished steel doors reflected a man he barely recognized, hollow-eyed, gaunt, his cheap suit hanging off his frame. The hope that had sustained him for so long had been extinguished, leaving behind a cold, dense smoke of despair. He walked out into the biting November wind, the city's noise a-roaring in his ears. He had nowhere to go. His tiny apartment felt like a tomb, and the thought of facing its silence was unbearable. He just walked. He walked for blocks, aimlessly, the worn satchel bumping against his hip, a constant reminder of his failure. He eventually found himself in a part of the city that felt older, more real. The gleaming towers gave way to brick-faced buildings with faded awnings. His legs, moving on autopilot, carried him toward the warm yellow glow of a diner. The sign above it, The Haven, had a few letters flickering, but it promised something he desperately needed. He pushed open the door, a small bell tinkling overhead. The air inside was thick with the smell of coffee, frying bacon, and something else, a quiet, unassuming warmth. It was late, and the place was mostly empty. A few truckers sat at the counter, hunched over plates of food. In a booth by the window, a woman with tired eyes and a kind smile was wiping down the table. Alex slid into a booth in the back corner, the red vinyl cracked and cool against his skin. He placed his satchel on the seat beside him as if it were a sleeping child. He felt utterly and completely defeated. The waitress came over. Her name tag read Clara. "Rough night?" she asked, her voice gentle. She placed a heavy ceramic mug on the table and filled it with coffee from a glass pot. Alex looked up at her. He saw no judgment in her eyes, only a simple human curiosity. He had been surrounded by sharks all day. This felt like finding a small, safe harbor. He nodded, unable to form words. "Coffee's on me," she said with a small smile. "You look like you need it more than I need the $1.50. He managed a weak, grateful smile. "Thank you." He sat there for an hour, maybe 2, nursing the coffee. He watched Clara move through the diner, refilling cups, sharing a quiet word with the regulars, moving with an economy of motion that spoke of long hours and endless work. She did not rush him. She did not ask him to order. She just let him be, occasionally topping off his mug with a silent nod. This small, unasked-for kindness was more profound than any encouragement he had received in years. It was a lifeline in the suffocating sea of his failure. He thought about Thorne and Jarrett, about their cold calculations and their casual cruelty. They lived in a world of numbers and power, a world so far removed from this simple, human place. He finally pulled out his laptop. He did not have the heart to look at the code, at the elegant, complex architecture of Aegis. Instead, he opened a blank document. He started to write, not a business plan, not an email, but the story. The story he had left out of the boardroom. He wrote about a rainy night 3 years ago, about his parents and his younger sister, Sarah, driving home from a recital. He wrote about the burst water main on the overpass that the city knew was failing but had not prioritized fixing. He wrote about the black ice it created, the chain reaction collision, the fire. He wrote about the phone call that had cleaved his life in 2. Tears streamed down his face as he typed, hot and silent. He poured all the grief, all the rage, all the suffocating helplessness into the document. He wrote until his fingers ached and his vision blurred. He wrote because he had to, because the story was choking him, and the boardroom's dismissal had ripped the wound wide open again. When he was done, he sat back, exhausted and empty. Clara was standing by his table, a fresh pot of coffee in her hand. Her expression was soft with concern. Are you okay? She asked quietly. He looked at the screen, at the raw, painful words. On a sudden, inexplicable impulse, he turned the laptop toward her. This is why, he said, his voice hoarse. This is why I was trying. He expected her to look away, to be made uncomfortable by the raw display of emotion. Instead, she pulled up a chair from a nearby table and sat down. She read the entire thing, her brow furrowed in concentration. When she finished, she looked at him, and her eyes were shining with unshed tears. My God, she whispered. You're not trying to stop the past. You're trying to build a future where no one else has to live through that. Her words were a perfect, stunning validation. She understood. In 10 minutes, this stranger in a worn-out diner uniform had understood his mission with more clarity and empathy than the most powerful investors in the city. For the first time all day, Alex felt a flicker of something other than despair. It was small, fragile, but it was there. It felt a little like hope. I failed, he said, the words heavy. They laughed me out of the room. Then they're fools, Clara said, her voice firm. She pushed the laptop back toward him. Don't you dare stop. People like them, they don't see the world. They just see balance sheets. You see what matters. He stayed until the first hints of dawn painted the sky a bruised purple. He and Clara talked. He told her about Aegis, explaining the complex systems in simple terms. She told him about her life, about raising her 8-year-old daughter, Lily, on her own, about the constant struggle to make ends meet. Their two worlds, so vastly different, found a common ground in that quiet corner of the diner. The haven became his sanctuary. Over the next few weeks, it was his office, his refuge, his confessional. He would arrive in the late afternoon, setting up his laptop in the back booth, and work through the night. He refined his code, ran simulations, and sent out dozens of funding requests to other firms. Each one met with a form letter rejection, or, more often, silence. The rejections stung. But they did not crush him as thorns had. Clara's simple, unwavering belief acted as a shield. One afternoon, he arrived to find a small girl with bright, curious eyes sitting in his booth, a box of crayons and a stack of paper spread before her. She was meticulously drawing a city filled with flying cars and smiling suns. Clara came over, a plate of fries in her hand. Lily, this is my friend, Alex. Alex, this is my daughter, Lily. Her after-school program got canceled today. Alex smiled. It's nice to meet you, Lily. That's a very advanced city you're building. Lily looked up at him, her gaze direct and serious. Mom says you build things on your computer to stop the sad things from happening. The innocent, direct summary of his life's work struck him with more force than any boardroom pitch. He felt a lump form in his throat. Yeah, he said softly. That's what I'm trying to do. Like when Mr. Henderson's cat got stuck in the tree, she asked. Or when the big pipe broke and our street got all floody? Exactly like that, Alex said. My computer would see the signs that the pipe was getting old and weak, and it would tell someone to fix it before it broke. Lily considered this with the gravity only a child can muster. That's a good thing to build, she concluded, and went back to her drawing. From that day on, Lily was often there when he arrived. She would do her homework, draw, and occasionally ask him questions about his work. Her presence changed the dynamic of his lonely vigil. He was no longer just a coder chasing a ghost. He was my friend, Alex, the man who was trying to stop the sad things. He found himself explaining his work through her eyes, simplifying the complex mission into its purest form, protecting people, protecting families, protecting this little girl coloring in the booth across from him. He and Clara grew closer. He learned about her dream of going back to school to become a social worker. She learned about the crushing loneliness that had defined his life since the accident. They never defined what was growing between them, but it was a quiet, steady warmth that thawed the permafrost around his heart. For the first time in 3 years, he was not just living for the past. He was tentatively, cautiously, living in the present. One evening, an email landed in his inbox that was not a rejection. The subject line was simply, "Your Aegis proposal." It was from a Julian Croft, the founder of a fund called Phoenix Legacy. Croft was a legendary figure in the tech world, a semi-retired visionary known for backing impossible, world-changing ideas that everyone else was too afraid to touch. He was Thorne's polar opposite, a builder, not a predator. The email was brief. "Mr. Vance, I was passed a copy of the pitch you made to Thorne Ventures. They are fools. I, however, am intrigued. My office, tomorrow, 10 a.m. Alex stared at the screen, his heart hammering against his ribs. He read it 3 times to make sure it was real. Hope, this time, was not a flicker. It was a blinding flash, like lightning. He looked up and caught Clara's eye from across the diner. He beckoned her over, a wide, genuine smile spreading across his face for the first time in years. He showed her the email. Her face broke into a radiant grin. She threw her arms around him in a spontaneous, joyful hug. "I told you," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "I told you they were fools. You're going to do it, Alex. You're really going to do it." He felt a surge of elation so powerful it almost lifted him off the cracked vinyl seat. It was happening. After all the pain, the loneliness, the rejection, someone finally saw what he saw. The next morning, as Alex was getting ready for the most important meeting of his life, his phone rang. It was Clara. "Alex, you're not going to believe this. What is it?" he asked, his mind already racing through his presentation for Croft. "He's here," she said, her voice low and tense. "Marcus Thorne. He's sitting in your booth." A cold dread washed over Alex, extinguishing the morning's warmth. "What does he want?" "I don't know, but he's been asking for you. Alex, be careful." He knew he should ignore it, should go straight to his meeting with Croft. But the thought of Thorne, that vulture, invading his sanctuary, was intolerable. He told Clara he was on his way. When he walked into the Haven, the atmosphere was thick with tension. The few regulars at the counter were pointedly ignoring the man in the $1,000 suit. Thorne sat in the back booth, a cup of coffee untouched before him. He looked utterly out of place, a shark in a fishbowl. Alex walked over, his satchel held tight in his hand. "Thorne, what are you doing here?" Thorne gave him that cold, reptilian smile. "Vance, I heard a rumor. A little bird told me that Julian Croft has taken an interest in your hobby project, a foolish, sentimental move on his part. But it does change the calculus slightly." "Get to the point," Alex said, his voice flat. "The point is, I'm prepared to make you an offer," Thorne said, leaning forward. "We'll acquire your code. A small seed investment, you might call it. $50,000. For everything. You walk away, and we'll see if our engineers can make something marketable out of your passion project." Alex stared at him, incredulous. It was not an offer. It was an insult. A power play designed to humiliate him, to buy his soul for pocket change before Croft could give it value. "You laughed me out of your office. You called my work a fantasy." "And it is," Thorne said smoothly, "but it's a fantasy that has attracted the attention of a competitor. That makes it a strategic asset, however flimsy. Take the deal, Vance. It's more than you'll get from anyone else. Croft will lose interest once he realizes it's all just smoke and mirrors." Before Alex could respond, Clara was at the table. She placed the check down in front of Thorne with a firm thud. "Your coffee is $150. Pay up and get out," she said, her voice trembling slightly but full of steel. Thorne looked at her, his eyes narrowing with disdain, as if noticing a piece of talking furniture. "I'm in the middle of a business negotiation with the boy here." "No, you're not," Clara said, standing her ground. "You're harassing my friend. This is a place for decent people. You don't belong here. Leave." For a moment, Thorne looked genuinely stunned that a waitress would dare to speak to him this way. He glanced from her determined face to Alex's stony expression. He saw a united front where he expected a broken, desperate man. He let out a short, humorless laugh. "Fine," he sneered, tossing a $5 bill on the table. "Keep the change. And when Croft's charity runs out, Vance, don't come crawling to me. My offer expires the second I walk out that door." He stood up, straightened his suit, and walked out of the diner, the bell above the door tinkling mockingly behind him. The diner was silent for a beat, and then one of the truckers at the counter started to applaud slowly. Clara blushed, a mixture of fear and pride on her face. Alex looked at her, his heart swelling with a feeling he could not name. Gratitude, admiration, something deeper. No one had ever stood up for him like that. Not ever. "Thank you," he said, his voice thick. "He's a bully," she said, still flustered. "I hate bullies. Now go. Go to your meeting. And don't you dare let that man live in your head for one more second." He left the diner, with her words echoing in his ears, feeling more powerful and more certain than he ever had before. The meeting with Julian Croft was not like the one with Thorne. Croft's office was warm, filled with books and fascinating gadgets. Croft himself was an older man with kind, intelligent eyes that seemed to see right through him. He did not care about 5-year projections, he cared about the why. Alex, emboldened by the morning's confrontation, told him everything. He told him about his family, about the accident, about the mission that drove him. He explained Aegis not as a product, but as a promise to build a smarter, safer world. Croft listened patiently, asking sharp, insightful questions. When Alex was finished, the old man leaned back in his chair and was silent for a long time. The ancient Greeks believed the Aegis was the shield of Zeus, a symbol of divine protection, Croft said finally. "It's a fitting name. Marcus Thorne and his kind, they're strip miners. They extract value and leave a hole in the ground. I prefer to plant trees. It's a slower return, but you leave behind a forest." He leaned forward, his gaze intense. "I'm not going to give you a seed round, Mr. Vance. That would be an insult to the scale of your vision. Phoenix Legacy will back Aegis for the full $150 million you'll need for a national rollout." Alex's breath caught in his chest. The number was so large, so impossibly, life-changingly vast, that it did not seem real. $150 million. It was not just funding, it was a declaration of faith. It was the validation he had been starving for. I don't know what to say," he stammered, his mind reeling. "Say you'll accept," Croft said with a warm smile. "Say you'll get to work." Alex walked out of the building in a daze, the city streets looking brighter, the air tasting sweeter. He had done it. He had actually done it. His first instinct was to call Clara, to share the incredible news. He pulled out his phone, his hands shaking with adrenaline and joy. But before he could dial, a frantic call came in from her. He answered, his triumphant greeting dying on his lips at the sound of her voice. She was sobbing, her words choked with panic. "Alex! Oh God, Alex, it's the apartment. There's a fire. The world tilted on its axis." "What? Clara, are you okay? Where's Lily?" "We're out. We're safe," she cried, her voice punctuated by the sound of sirens in the background. "But everything is gone. The fire started in the apartment below us. The wiring in this building is ancient. We always knew it was a risk. The irony was so cruel, so monstrous, it felt like a cosmic joke. On the very day his dream of preventing such tragedies was realized, the woman and child who had become his entire world were caught in one. The elation of moments before curdled into a cold, sickening dread. "Where are you?" he asked, already running, flagging down a taxi. He found them a few blocks from their building, huddled on a street corner wrapped in coarse red blankets provided by the fire department. The street was a chaotic mess of fire trucks, police cars, and flashing lights. Thick, black smoke billowed into the night sky from the top floors of their building. The sight, the smell, the sounds, It all came rushing back. The acrid smoke, the screaming sirens, the flashing lights painting the rainy asphalt. It was his parents' accident all over again. He felt a paralyzing wave of PTSD, so powerful it buckled his knees. He was that helpless boy again, standing on the side of a highway, watching his world burn. For a moment, he could not move, could not breathe. His invention, his life's work, the $150 million contract sitting in his satchel, it was all just useless code, meaningless paper. It could not turn back time. It could not unburn a building. It had not protected them. He had failed. Again, the universe, it seemed, was telling him that he was destined to stand by and watch the people he cared about suffer. The old despair, the familiar companion of his grief, wrapped its cold arms around him. Then, through the chaos, he saw Lily. Her small face was streaked with sodden tears. She saw him, and her expression changed. She broke away from her mother's side and ran toward him, her small legs pumping. She crashed into his legs, wrapping her arms around him in a desperate hug. She looked up at him, her big, trusting eyes searching his. "You came," she said, her voice a small, shaky whisper. It was not an accusation. It was not a plea. It was a statement of fact, of faith. In her world, it was simple. There was a sad thing happening, and her friend, Alex, the man who stops the sad things, had come. Her simple, unwavering trust shattered his paralysis. It was like a bucket of cold, clear water to the face. He was not that helpless boy on the side of the road anymore. He was a man. He had resources. He had a purpose, and that purpose was standing right in front of him, clinging to his legs. He knelt down and wrapped his arms around her, pulling her into a fierce, protective hug. "I'm here," he whispered into her hair. "I'm here. It's going to be okay." He looked over at Clara, who was watching them with a heartbreaking mix of relief and devastation. He stood up, taking Lily's hand, and walked over to her. He put his other arm around her shoulders, pulling her and her daughter into a small, tight circle against the chaos. "We'll figure it out," he said, his voice firm and clear. "Not just for her, but for himself. All of it. I promise." In that moment, standing on a smoke-filled street corner, everything crystallized. His mission was no longer an abstract concept fueled by past grief. It was real. It was tangible. It was the warmth of Clara's shoulder under his arm and the squeeze of Lily's small hand in his. He was not just building Aegis to honor his family's memory. He was building it to protect his future. The next 24 hours were a blur. Alex checked them into a comfortable hotel, buying them clothes and necessities. He sat with Lily while she drew pictures of firefighters and new houses, and he held Clara while she cried for the loss of their home and all the small, irreplaceable memories it contained. He did not talk about the money or the deal. He was just there, present and steady, a rock in the turbulent flood of their lives. The following morning, he left them sleeping and went to see Julian Croft. He walked into the office not as a desperate supplicant, but as a man with a renewed and unshakable resolve. "There's been a change of plans," Alex said, before Croft could even offer him a seat. Croft raised an eyebrow. "Oh?" "I accept your offer," Alex said, "but I'm not just building a company anymore. 10% of Aegis's equity will be placed into a charitable foundation. The Aegis Foundation will provide direct aid to families displaced by civic failures, fires, floods, infrastructure collapses. It will rehouse them, help them rebuild. We're not just going to predict the disasters, we're going to help clean them up." Croft stared at him for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then, a slow, wide smile spread across his face. "I knew I was right about you, son," he said, standing up and extending his hand. "That's not a change of plans. That's an upgrade. Get the lawyers on the phone. Let's build a forest." The news of the $150 million funding round, coupled with the announcement of the foundation, sent shockwaves through the tech and financial worlds. It was the lead story on every major business network. Alexander Vance, the unknown outcast, was suddenly the most talked about founder in the country. His phone, which had been silent for months, began to melt. His inbox, once a graveyard of rejection letters, became a flood of congratulations, inquiries, and job applications. And then came the emails he had been waiting for. The first was from Jarrett, the slick-haired sycophant from the Thorn Ventures board. It was filled with fawning praise. "Alex, my man, knew you had it in you from the start. That pitch was pure genius. We were just stress testing you. Call me. Let's do lunch." Alex read it, a bitter smile touching his lips. He pressed delete. Dozens more followed from the other board members, each one a variation on the same theme of transparent, self-serving revisionist history. He deleted them all without a second thought. Their opinions were meaningless now. They were ghosts from a life he no longer lived. Finally, the email from Marcus Thorne arrived. It was, in its own way, a masterpiece of corporate groveling, stripped of all genuine emotion. "Mr. Vance," it began. "It appears I misjudged the market's appetite for a project of your unique scope. A regrettable oversight. In light of your new partnership with Mr. Croft, I would like to propose a strategic alliance. Thorn Ventures can offer a level of logistical support and market access that Phoenix Legacy cannot. I believe, together, we could achieve great things. I apologize for any prior misunderstandings. My office is always open to you." Alex read the words, and he did not feel anger or even triumph. He felt nothing. He thought of Thorne's sneer in the boardroom. He thought of his condescending offer in the diner. He thought of the look on his face when Clara had told him to leave. He looked across the hotel room where Clara was helping Lily with a puzzle on the floor. The sound of their quiet laughter was the only validation he would ever need. He selected Thorne's email and moved his cursor over the small trash can icon. He clicked it, and with that simple, quiet act, Marcus Thorne and his entire world ceased to exist. 2 years later. The headquarters of Aegis Technologies occupied 3 floors of a gleaming new building downtown, a tower of glass and steel that, unlike Thorne's, felt full of light and purpose. The main operations center was a vast, quiet room dominated by a massive screen displaying a map of North America. Cities glowed with a soft green light, crisscrossed with the flow of data. Alex stood before the screen, but he was not looking at the data streams. He was watching a small girl with pigtails who was sitting at a large, custom-built desk in the corner, coloring in a book. Lily was 10 now, and this corner of his office was her designated after-school spot. The door opened, and Clara came in. She had finished her degree and now ran the day-to-day operations of the Aegis Foundation. She looked happy, confident, her tired edges replaced by a vibrant energy. She walked over to Alex and kissed him, a familiar, easy gesture. "Anything new?" she asked, nodding toward the map. "The system just flagged a pressure anomaly in a gas main in suburban Chicago," he said, pointing to a blinking yellow light on the map. "It's a 1 in a million fault, but the model predicts a rupture within 72 hours. We've alerted the local utility. They're dispatching a crew." He thought about the potential devastation. A city block leveled, families destroyed, all averted by a quiet alarm in this room. They were stopping the sad things. "Good," she said, squeezing his hand. "Are you two ready to go?" "Lily has been talking about meatloaf all day." Alex smiled. "Meatloaf sounds perfect." Instead of heading to one of the city's fancy new restaurants, they drove to a familiar neighborhood. They parked in front of the Haven. The sign was still flickering. The windows still cast the same warm yellow glow. They slid into the back booth, their booth. The vinyl was still cracked. The air still smelled of coffee and home. An older waitress took their order, and they settled into the comfortable quiet. Alex looked around the diner. a place that had once been his only refuge. He remembered the broken man who had stumbled in here, drowning in failure and grief. He looked at Clara, her hand resting on his, and at Lily, who was trying to balance a spoon on her nose. His life had been rebuilt from the ground up, right here in this booth. Lily, having failed to balance the spoon, looked at him with her serious eyes. "Alex," she said, "did you stop all the sad things from happening yet?" He looked at Clara, saw the love and shared history in her eyes. He looked back at her daughter, this bright, wonderful child who had become his own. The scope of his work, the success, the money, it all faded into the background, leaving only this simple, perfect truth. "Not all of them, sweetie," he said softly, reaching across the table to brush a stray crayon smudge from her cheek. "I don't think anyone can. But we're stopping a lot of them. And for the ones we can't stop," he added, his gaze meeting Clara's, "we've learned how to be there for each other. And that's just as important." Clara's smile was all the confirmation he needed. The waitress brought their food, and the three of them, a small, unlikely family forged in failure and fire, ate their dinner, their quiet laughter filling the warm air of the diner that had saved him. He had come here seeking a haven from the world, and in the end, he had built one of his own.